Good morning. Welcome to Adobe Live. I'm Spencer Nugent. Hopefully you caught the stream yesterday. We're gonna have fun getting started today. Let me just pull up my mirror here so I can see what's happening. Not bean juice today. Hot lemon health juice is what we got going on. So welcome to the stream. Thanks for being here. Just to give you a look ahead at what we'll be covering today, we've got getting started with me, Spencer Nugent. Up next, we have the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge, character design with Jonah Loeb at 9:30 a.m. 11:30 a.m. Pacific, we have the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Julia Masalska. And then we have video editing with Olivia and Zach Fields at 12 p.m. Pacific, the XD Creative Challenge with Howard Pinsky, and Doodle Therapy with Alice Lee and Sid Violet. Ran into a few difficulties yesterday, but hopefully things work out just fine today. All right, so we're gonna kick things off and continue what we covered yesterday. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick review for the next 5 minutes of what we covered. So in case you missed it, you'll want to go catch the video before. And then we're gonna do a little bit of scene breakdown, perspective, and we're gonna paint, have some fun, import some brushes, do some things, and hopefully you all learn with me together. Creativity is all about learning, I think, making mistakes, having fun, seeing what comes out on the other end. All right, here we go. Okay, so I've got Fresco open on my iPad. I also have Photoshop. We're gonna jump between a little bit here and there, and hopefully things don't blow up too much. You never know. And thank you. I appreciate the compliments on the hat. It's a little chilly here. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a little chilly today, so had to put on the hat. Okay, so yesterday, let's see. I'm gonna jump to my work. It's still updating here a little bit. I switched back to another app, but we covered drawing in perspective, reflections, materials, finishes, that kind of thing. I may have to take the hat off eventually because it is kind of hot. It's warm. Anyhow, so we did this little demo. We talked about light. We talked about how light works. Let me actually go ahead and group these together because I was lazy. I didn't group all my layers together. All you have to do is tap. You can see the touch indicator on the screen. We can drag down, and now these will all be in a group. And I can just turn this off. It's kind of like doing your homework when you show up to school, right? Anyhow, we're gonna drag these down, turn this off, turn this on. We covered some basic lighting techniques with the pencil, the default brush, that kind of thing. And then also, why aren't you showing up? Oh, it's because each of you is turned off. Okay, so let's take a look at our group here. Talked about perspective, details being more pronounced up close as opposed to afar. We talked about color saturation and scale. Okay, let's turn this off as well. Warm-up exercises, super important. I'm not gonna do that today, but if you want to catch that, be sure to check out the video from yesterday. Okay, we cover some warm-up techniques and how to get ready to draw and paint. All right, so with that, I'm gonna jump back out of my group here. Just a reminder, if you wanna get into the group, to tap inside the group, arrow gets you outside the group, okay? So I'm gonna exit my document here and let's pull up the other one. I'll show you what we did. So we talked about light, how that impacts surfaces, how to paint, create textures, contrast, that kind of thing. Contrast is king. It will show you, or rather communicate depth in your paintings and so forth. So went through this little exercise. Again, if you missed it, check it out in the archive. All right, so let's get started with today's painting or drawing. Now I wanted to, well, it looks like it didn't save my thing here. Hopefully it's still on the clipboard. Okay, cool. So I want to talk a little bit about scenes. Because I want to do a landscape drawing or painting with you guys today. We did have a request yesterday as well for trees, and I'm going to show you how to import brushes and just play with some brush settings so that we can get creative in Adobe Fresco. Just a reminder, Adobe Fresco is Adobe's absolutely free drawing app for tablets specifically, iPad Pro, Microsoft Surface Pro, and Wacom Mobile Studio Pro products as well. So again, the best part is you can just jump right in, get creative, try some stuff, and It is free. Okay, so let's take a look at this picture. And you know, good photography, I think, is a good way to kind of break things down and understand perhaps how composition kind of works. So we're gonna break this down in terms of 2D composition and then in terms of 3D composition for you today. All right. So I'm going to tap on the layer here and let's lower the opacity just so I can draw on top. All right, I'm going to hide that on a new layer. Let me make sure I'll just clear this layer. So if you want to clear a layer, you can tap on it, hit clear layer, and it erases all the pixels on that layer. Just in case you made a mistake or you want to start over for some reason. It's kind of like taking your paper, crushing it up and tossing it. I do that all the time, believe me. But make sure you recycle. No recycling with digital though. Okay. So I'm going to use the default pencil and let's use a red pen. So let's make some observations here. We've got the horizon line of this picture somewhere here. Okay. So this is our horizon. If you're wondering what the blue dot is on the screen, that is the touch indicator, something I turned on so that you guys can see what's happening. Okay. That's what that blue dot is. If it's in your app, you can always turn it off by hitting settings. Going into app settings, input, touch, and then turn off show touches. But I'm going to leave that on for you so you can see where I'm going. All right. Feel free to shoot me any questions in the behance.net/live chat, by the way. That's where I'm paying attention, watching myself, watching you guys. Tim, as always, is manning the chat as well. So feel free to ask questions there. Okay. So there's my horizon line. And I would say halfway of the picture is about here. So this is about half. All right. So for me, typically this wouldn't be ideal. However, there's something clever done here. And there's an idea in many compositions, this idea of the rule of thirds. Okay. So if I divide this scene into thirds like so, okay, third, 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 all right, you can kind of see there's some logic and reason to where things are. We can do this again this way. And this is just a guesstimate here. All right. But if I take a look at this in terms of thirds, let's change the color of the horizon line because I don't want to confuse everyone. Okay. So there's our horizon line right there. Oh, I was wondering what that, I heard myself talking on my other screen. Apologies there. I was like, what's going on? Anyhow, there's my horizon line, and you can kind of see there's a logical breakdown here of how the photographer at least composed the scene. So compositionally speaking, the rule of thirds is a good way to kind of place the masses, if you will, when it comes to your objects and so forth. So for example, let's see, what's a good color I can use here? Maybe just this really bright green. So we've got this, and I'm going to try and simplify, right? Just so we can look at things. So we've got this mountain mass here. We've got another one here, and we've got another one here. Okay. Just like that. All right. So if you look at these masses and you can kind of see there's some relationship here to the third, right? It's not a perfect thing and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a good guideline. Okay. It's a good guideline. So as you're drawing, if you're looking to compose a scene or put together a composition, you can kind of think in terms of these thirds. Now, perhaps it's not as easy to see in the foreground, but you do get a little bit of that as well happening here. So I've got some major elements here, and rules are meant to be broken once understood, because when you understand the rules, they become guidelines, and guidelines can be bent. Okay. They can be bent if not broken. All right, so that's kind of just a quick breakdown on the scene. So what if let me go ahead and group these. So I'm just going to tap, drag and drop, boom. Now it's in a group. What if we took the elements of this scene? Actually, let's duplicate this layer. You can tap on a layer and a contextual menu will show up giving you additional actions. Okay, so I can duplicate that layer. And the reason I'm duplicating is I want to kind of save this in the group on its own. All right, so now that's off. Let's crank the opacity back up here. Oops. And something of note I want to point out to you. So to get this image in, I actually went into Safari. I found an image. That's just the web browser on an iPad Pro. copied it and pasted it just for the example here. Okay. So one thing I want to point out is if you look very closely at the icon next to the layer, it's going to look like, good morning, Felix, Steve, Mallory. It's going to look like a little photo. Okay, that means that it's a photo layer. So I can't draw directly on the layer. So if I take my pencil now and try and draw, Fresco will actually just create a new layer because it's not a pixel layer. If I want to draw and manipulate those exact pixels, then I need to actually tap on the layer and hit convert to pixel layer right there. Okay, now I can draw on that layer, I can manipulate, I can even smudge those pixels. So if you want to paint really quickly even, right, we can take a photo like this, photo elements, and then just smudge and then add some texture. Okay, so quick way to cheat if you, well, not cheat, but work efficiently if you want to. I like the challenge personally, so we're going to build our own textures. We're going to use some brushes. We're going to get creative. But certainly, we can use elements of this drawing, for example, to get us there. Now, remember yesterday I told you, you can see 3 dots on the screen or 2 dots. If you tap on the screen with 2 fingers, it will undo. 3-finger tap gives you a redo. Okay, so I want to undo those smudges I made. So now that's undone. And just for convenience sake here, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the layer again. You'll see why later. So let's turn that off. And now I'm going to scale this down and let's talk about foreground, midground, and background. Okay. So if I look at my painting here, zoomed in, and I'll go ahead and I think in this instance, let's convert this to a pixel layer. So my foreground, oops, wrong brush. So my foreground here, I would kind of define as mostly this stuff, this foliage right here. Okay. If I were to attempt to define the midground, it's probably this stuff right in here. Okay. Maybe a little bit back to here as well. Okay. You can just include that, the pink lines. So this is going to be our mid. Well, let's just do this off to the side. So we've got our midground, right? And right here, we'll have our 4. It's a big pencil. So we'll have our foreground here. And then all the way in the back, we have the background. Let's use a blue for that one. Seems appropriate. Background and sky, right? All this stuff. There's probably multiple layers here, but I want to show you something cool and a different way to think about this. So we've got our background. Okay. Now, if I were to translate this into perspective, okay, let's just draw a big arrow and we're going to draw on top of this arrow. So stick with me here. So if we're to take this scene and translate it into perspective, what's actually going to happen, or a way to think about it rather, is you can think about this slice. Okay, so here's our trees and foliage stuff, right? And like I said, there's likely a few different layers to this tree, but you can kind of think of it like this. You know, maybe these layers are the foreground, and then you're gonna have the lake and all that stuff, right? All these other layers right in here. Okay, this is gonna be our, and it's almost like you're looking at this stack this way. Okay. Maybe a better way to have the arrows go that way, but in any case, it's almost like you're looking at that stack. All right. So we've got our foreground, and what else do we have? We had like some mountains here. So maybe this is another layer, or maybe just some hills rather. Another layer here, like so. So these become our midground. All right. And then in the very back, we have our mountains and our clouds and all that stuff. Okay. So this is another set of layers, if you will. Okay. And this is going to be the background. All right. So in terms of organizing your scene and thinking through your planning as to, if you want to just draw something from your imagination, maybe it's an alien world, maybe it's a peaceful valley with a farmhouse or whatever. I like doing peaceful things. You can kind of think of what you're doing in terms of stacks, or when in doubt, rough it out. Okay. When in doubt, rough it out. Think through those problems, make it easier for yourself, and I mean, just like I said, it'll be easier. Okay, so break it down, rough it out, work light. All right, so there's a quick example. So let's jump into just sketching out a quick scene. So I'm going to use this same setup here. Okay, and I'm using a tabloid sized canvas. Now, let's say you're working and you want to resize your canvas in Fresco. You can do that at any point. By way of information, Fresco is actually also recording all the brush strokes I make. So if I want to export this as a video, I can export this as a video. It's pretty freaking cool. Okay, so I'm going to hit settings, jump into size. Okay, if you want to rename it, you can do that as well. We can call this landscape. Oops, can't spell today. Landscape, there we go. We can do that. Or if you want to change the size, so if you want to make it wider, if you want to increase the DPI, that kind of thing, you're welcome to do that. But I'm just going to go with the default. Just wanted to show you that it is possible to crop, resize, make changes as needed. Okay, so hit OK. Whatever changes you make will be put into the document. All right, so let's hit done here, and I'm going to jump to a new layer. So when I'm doing a landscape or any kind of painting, I like to kind of thumbnail things out. And I'm trying to decide if I want to do the tree first or after, but let's jump in here and start thumbnailing. Okay, so a thumbnail, much like the nail on your thumb, is a small drawing. Okay, you can just think of it as a very small drawing. But this gives me a chance to kind of plan out my scene. All right, so let's just do a couple quick thumbnails here, and I'm making basically mini canvases. Is it canvases? Canvases? Pretty sure it's canvases. Okay, so I'm just making some mini canvases here, and you know, I can kind of imagine, I like hills. You know, maybe there's some lake or something, right, piercing through. So we can kind of just thumbnail or create a nice rough sketch, right? So when we zoom out, we'll see kind of what this looks like, and maybe just some other hills in the foreground. All right, whatever you feel like doing. All right, we're just riffing and going here. Maybe there's some old cabin in the valley or something, right? And we want to capture that. Some fence. You know, where I live, we have quite a varied landscape, so super inspiring to have those options for inspiration. And inspiration's everywhere you are, so find ways to get that. All right, so maybe this is a quick thumbnail here, a couple clouds in the sky, that kind of thing. All right, and this is essentially a personal communication sketch just to help you kind of plan ahead and do some heavy lifting up front without the stress of precision and execution. All right, so we can do another one. Maybe it's a different perspective. Maybe it's a perspective of, let's see, maybe there's some fence or something here. It's going to run down a hill. Who knows, right? We can kind of just riff, come up with what we want. Maybe there's a big lake, right? And just, lakes are cool because you can kind of get some cool reflections in, that kind of thing. All right, but maybe the fence comes up here. So again, you can play with scale, and scale will kind of help you indicate the placement in your scene. So this fence essentially can go forward, down, up, back this way, and perhaps travel down. Could be a road, something like that. Okay. All right, but it all depends on the landscape you want to cover and so forth. All right, maybe just some shadows. But I kind of like this one, just this nice, you know, body of water, perhaps pond. We got some big elements here, and like I said, someone wanted a tree yesterday, so maybe there's a way to get some sort of tree up in here. So I'll just scribble in some sort of tree thing right here. All right, away from the light, we'll have shadow, so maybe I can block in a nice shadow there. Okay, some clouds and so forth. All right, so there's another thumbnail, for example, compositionally speaking. Or maybe we want to do a different kind of scene. Maybe it is, you know, lots of trees. Some sort of grove or something. All right, so we could use scale more so to communicate the perspective, right? And maybe that little cabin. I don't know, maybe I'm just dreaming of the future when, you know, I've always said I want to retire in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, but maybe there is some trees here, you know, surrounding this thing. And we can play with things like shadows to communicate the direction of the light, for example. So there's another one. Let's do one more. Canvas. That's right. The plural of canvas is canvas. Here on Adobe Live, we make words up. I forgot the word we made up yesterday. Do you remember that, Tim? We like to, I mean, creativity, right? Make up some words, make up some stuff. It's all good. I just like having fun and making mistakes. Okay, so let's do another one. It's really going to be hard to choose, but I'm kind of leaning right now between these two so far. We could probably do some sort of valley here. Maybe some bluff. A little bit more alpine climate, perhaps. All right, we could have sun peeking through. So I'm going to do some opposite shading here, but maybe the sun's peeking through. Frosty cabin. Again, the cabin in every scene. We're doing a cabin scene. But it's probably just a little bit of me dreaming. Okay, a couple trees here. All right, and again, if we want to play with perspective, you can see just having that scale can kind of help. All right, so it is going to be hard to kind of pick here, but I think I want to do, since this will give me a chance to do some trees with you guys, probably one of these two. So A, B, C, and D. I'm gonna go with C because I do want to do some reflection, although I could do a little bit of a pond in here too. But I think I'm gonna go with C. All right, so I have my thumbnails. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna duplicate this thumbnail. I just want to keep it on the same layer. I like to work in non-destructive ways when possible. That way it allows me to save what I did. And if I want to go back and change something, it's relatively easy to do that. So we're going to try and move quick today because I only have an hour. And, you know, these paintings, they can take a minute. Megan says, one of my favorite made-up words is solutionized. Yeah, you know, working in the corporate world, sometimes people get creative with their words. I'll just say that. Okay. All right, so if you want to paste, just tap on the layer and hit paste selection. I made a selection, copied it. Now I can paste it. So with the thumbnail, what I can do is we can actually just blow this up. All right, so we can blow this up real big. And what this is going to do is it's going to help me preserve essentially the gesture and feeling of what we had before. All right, so let's hit done. Now I'm going to tap on my layer control, slide the opacity way down, and let's do another sketch on top. But because it's bigger now, I can focus on some of these details. If you want to just go in and start painting, you could certainly do that as well. But I want to add a little bit of fidelity here. For example, maybe it's the fence itself. Okay, coming in like so. And I'm not really using the lines to paint so much as just kind of guide me and make sure I am thinking of details and such that I want to include here. All right. Got to think about, okay, so this goes down. down the hill like so. And now I can kind of sketch in my hill. All right, maybe a little bit of a bluff here coming down, right? So even some of the earlier strokes that I had, they're so gestural that it's kind of hard to really tell what's happening. And so you may consider, you know, what details could those things be as you're drawing. All right, so this sketch is just kind of a guide here to help me out. All right, so maybe we have a little bit of a dirt beach, or I don't know, maybe sandy. Just a little bit of a beach there. Kind of sketch out a little bit more of the landscape. Zoom in, figure out what this cabin thing is. I'm gonna go with just an A-frame, some sort of steep A-frame cabin. It's a nice chimney. All right, just nice and simple. I guess they're usually a little steeper, right? Something like that. Okay, but I've got that there now. The hill, if we want, we can kind of shape that out. So maybe have another way off in the distance. So again, I'm thinking about these layers as I do this. You know, what's going to be in the foreground? Okay, what's in the background? Maybe indicating where I want to put some trees. I'm not going to paint to the lines per se. All right, but maybe that's where I'll put some trees. All right, so let's just keep sketching here. So with a tree, we talked a little bit about yesterday, and I have talked about this on Adobe Live before, but the idea of breaking things down. So a tree, if you think about it, it's kind of like a cylinder, right? So even as I'm sketching this, I'm thinking, okay, if this tree's changing direction, it's like a series of cylinders. If there's a split here, right, then I could work out my transitions if I want and sketch around it. But it gives me an idea of where to put shadows, emphasis, how the light's going to fall on the surfaces, things like that, okay? If I think of it in those terms. Granted, that's super time consuming, so if you want, you could even take a picture of a tree and throw it in and use that smudge method I kind of showed you. All right. So I'm just going to rough in overall tree shape here. Again, right, I'm trying to think in terms of thirds. So if I make a new layer, and this is just subconscious, you get used to it when you practice, okay? But if I break this up into thirds, you can kind of see roughly. I'm going to make these lines real thick. But you can kind of see the breakdown here, okay, in terms of thirds. So again, subconscious thing, but if you use this as a guide, you can always break it, you know. We can break through our guide here with the tree, or it might be portions of the foreground, but having these strong elements at these key points kind of helps create a pleasing composition. So take a look at photography, take a look at the work of other artists, and you'll be inspired to compose your drawings in a more pleasing way. I'm going to merge these two layers together, all right, because I have enough here now that I think I can just start painting. And let's adjust the opacity. And I'm going to try something new actually on the stream. So we're going to be creative and experiment together. So rather than creating all the textures with my live brushes, I'm going to use a combination of live brushes and show you guys a little bit of importing brushes into Fresco. All right. So let's start with our color. If you want, you can use something like Adobe Capture to take a picture of an actual scene, or if you have a photo for reference, we can, and let's say this is close enough to your color palette that you're after. I'm going to transform this down. Let's make a new layer. And I'm going to use this layer as my palette. So let's go ahead and pick, let's see, from my favorites, I have this hard round brush. So I can go ahead and if I tap on the canvas, we have that loop that pops up. So I can pick some colors now and start painting those to save them essentially as a palette that I can use, okay? So if I have these colors, and if there's ones that I want specifically, we can just put those down, right, just to save those. And like I've said before, there's always multiple ways to work in the same app. So if you figure out a way to do this otherwise, feel free to use that in your paintings or your drawings. It's all good. Like I said, you can use Adobe Capture. These two are so close. I'm just gonna erase this one. And let's see, I want like a really bright, oh, just barely missed it. Kind of have to roll your finger a little bit. They're really bright green. And there's a really interesting brownish mauve up here or something. Right there. There we go. All right, so this gives me a few starting points anyways for my painting. So let's turn this layer off, right? I've got some colors to start with. So let's see. Because I use a lot of layers, sometimes I play the let's see which layer it is game by turning layers on and off. So if you're wondering what I'm doing there, that's what I'm doing. So once again, I am checking the behance.net/live chat if you want to join in. And we're just doing a quick, hopefully relatively quick, landscape painting and answering your questions. All right. So again, I mentioned yesterday we have pixel brushes. There's also live brushes. And there's vector brushes. We're not doing vector today, but we are doing live brushes. And I'm going to use the oil. You can use whichever one works for you. Here, I'm going to use the round oil. And we have some settings here, brush size. We have a flow setting for the pigment. I'm going to crank this up a little bit. I'm going to turn the mix down. Mix just has to do with how the paint mixes with what's already on the canvas. Okay. So if you want to kind of blend your colors together essentially as you paint, then you want to have a higher mix value. All right, so remember colors closer to us are going to be more saturated. All right, so I'm going to start with, and I'm going to try and divide these into fore, mid, and background in terms of how we paint this. All right, I've got my sketch layer on top. Okay, so we'll start with this. All right, from the foreground, background, things like the hills and so forth. I want to make sure, actually I don't think I pulled these colors. So I'm going to pull one of these greens, something like that. And now make a new layer. I'm going to have this behind. All right, just like so. And I want that to be even lighter. So what I can do is tap on the color here, open up my HSB sliders, up my brightness, and lower the saturation even more. And if I want this to be more in the blue range, bluish green, we can do that as well, just by adjusting those sliders. All right. So this will be my background layer. I don't have to paint all the way across, and I want this hill that's a bit further back to be even more bluish and faded. So I'm going to drop the saturation even more, reduce the brush size. Okay. Now I have another hill here. And if we have something further off in the distance, remember saturation, okay, detail will be lessened as we move back. And now I can kind of do the midground rather, along with some of these elements that are a bit closer. So something like this fence. Let's go ahead and drop my saturation a little bit. and make sure I'm on my foreground layer. Let's up the size a little bit just to make this a little easier here. And we'll just color block this in, okay? And whatever stroke works for you, just try to be consistent and committed in its appearance, and you'll gain that consistency hereafter. Now, I do need to do the midground, so I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to start, we're going to probably have a couple layers here actually, at least for the midground, because I've got things like this fence that I want to make sure is above certain things, okay? Especially since it's kind of important to how my perspective is showing up here. Now the lake itself, I think I'm just going to go ahead and let's pick, actually, I think I'll do the sky and then we'll do the lake. But let's go to the midground here. We'll start with this green and let's push it a bit more into the oranges. Maybe something like this for the mid. Okay, a little bit bigger brush here. Below the fence, and I'll just paint this in. So the reason you'd use live brushes, wow, that was hard to say. The reason I like live brushes is they do mimic real media. So if you're used to using real media or even curious with or about real media rather, you can use live brushes, and in this case of the oils, they perform, blend, and show up much like real oil paints would. Okay, very relaxing and enjoyable. All right, so remember my sketch. Oh, I shouldn't have covered that up. I just want to show you. So there's that texture, right? Makes it look like a real canvas. So remember my sketch is on the very top layer. So that's why, if you're wondering, why isn't the sketch showing up? Or why is the sketch showing up? It's because it's on the top layer. Okay. I'm not too worried about the edges here. If I need to clean that up, we can clean that up later as well. And so let's just keep blocking in. Pardon me. Keep blocking in our color. All right, just like so. Right now it is a little flat in terms of color, but we're gonna make this pop a bit more. All right. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna pick some of this yellow. Let's go a little bit brighter. And now I'm going to reduce my flow and up my mix a little bit more. Okay. So on the hill here, I can start to, for example, add some light. If on this crest, I want to do the same, okay, up my saturation and brightness, maybe even venture into a little bit of green. It's a little too neon. It's a bit better. Then I can mix that color up front here. Now it is lacking in texture, okay, but we're gonna do something cool. Play around and see what we can come up with here. All right, let's go ahead and I'll just make this part of the foreground layer as well. Not really worried about the tree right now, but we will paint that in. Okay, let me move this palette. And I'm going to drag this all the way to the top so I have it there at least as a reference. Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm going to make another layer. Let's take care of some sky stuff, sky tones. Again, if you want to look at a photo for reference, or just look outside, whatever, you can do that. I'm just going to pick one of these sky colors here. But you'll notice, hopefully you'll notice anyways, the sky goes from very saturated at the top to desaturated as you move toward the horizon. There's also a haze that's introduced that we can address later as well in the painting. All right. So on this background layer now, and don't worry, we'll get to our happy little tree in the foreground. We haven't forgotten about our happy tree. Is that okay to say, Tim? Maybe that's trademarked, I don't know. But now I'm just gonna kind of block in some sky here. All right. And for purposes of blending, I'm gonna get some gray and just get this closer to my mountains, like so. All right. And now, as I mentioned yesterday, if you want to blend these, try to think of the direction, okay, the direction you want to go or blend. So if I want to pull the more saturated blue in, then I would start from the top and blend down. That's right, happy little tree. There'll be more trees though, don't worry. So now I'm going to go a little bit lighter with this blue toward the middle. And kind of just create a nice variable tone here. We can always massage this later. Let's turn off our sketch, see how we're doing. All right, so we've got colors blocking in, and then we're gonna add our textures and all that good stuff. Okay, so back to our sky here, like so. All right, so the reason I wanted to do the sky, or one of the reasons, is I want to create a reflection for the lake. So what I'm going to do is just tap this layer and now duplicate it. And if I go to transform, we can flip the layer vertically because that's basically what a reflection is. And now I can just drag this in place for where the water is. Okay, hit done. And because it's behind everything now, it makes it really easy to do that reflection. Cool. So let's go ahead and pick this color. Continue painting, just fill out. For the reflection of the hills on top, we can make a selection. Let's see, I got to think about this a little bit. Yeah, so I'm going to take this background portion here. Okay, make sure you're on the correct layer though. All right, so I'm on that layer. Now I'm going to tap on this layer, hit duplicate selection, which copies and pastes. We can flip this and then drag this down like so. All right, hit done. We're going to use this to help us create our reflection in the scene. All right, so again, just blocking in color, right? Working quickly here. Let's get our cabin. I want to make it, for some reason, maybe the roof is red. What do you guys think? Maybe the roof could be red here. Or at least, at the very least, the cabin could be red. I like a red roof. Let's go with some sort of red roofed cabin. All right, so we'll just block this in. Scale this down. So if you work creatively, you can work a bit more quickly with your paintings as you go. All right, so we'll do this. We'll do something similar to figure out the trees and foliage as we go to add texture and so forth. All right, but we're just going to move quickly. That's the idea. All right, so there's our red home now on this area. Okay, so I also mentioned yesterday, step 1, block your color in. Okay, get your big bits of color, and I haven't done the tree yet, so I got to do that. I'm going to jump back to my reference photo for colors. Again, if you wanted to, you could use something like Adobe Capture to pick up some colors. Now, let's take a look at the foliage. So again, if you understand how something works, it makes it easier. You're going to have, in this case, oops, in the case of this photo, let's jump back to my pencil here so we can dissect this a little bit. Let's learn ourselves a little something here. So there's almost, pardon me, there's almost a layering. Okay, so you're going to have dark, and then on top of that dark, you have the mids, and then on top of the mids, right, you have highlights. Okay, at least that's how it feels in my head. Whether or not that's actual. So in other words, I'm going to start with dark values for this tree object, and then we're going to layer some lighter stuff on top. Now, there are quicker ways to work, but let's just get the base tone down. By quicker ways, what I mean to say is that I can actually take a brush, and I have some brushes that we'll import to help us create that foliage a lot quicker for the tree itself. All right, so I'm going to turn that off now. I have the color selected. Jump back to my oil paint. Let's do a quick layer creation here. And we're on the oil paint round. This still feels a little bit too dark, so I'm going to brighten it up a little bit and maybe desaturate just a bit. All right. But again, colors, right, are going to be more saturated and pronounced, pardon me, the closer they are to us. All right. So on the perimeter of this, it's very windswept tree here. I guess if it is windswept, the trunk would want to go this way, wouldn't it? So we can always change that. All right, so I may start with the darks there, and now, you know, pick this green. We can go a little bit brighter, like so. Again, just blocking in that color. And we'll get the dark spots as well, and then even brighter now for our foliage on top. Now, if you had time and you really wanted to get in there and, you know, create your leaf patterns, you could go ahead and do that. But again, we're going to try a few things to help us speed up here. I'm going to lower the paint mix and increase my flow so I get some nice strong strokes here in terms of color. All right, now I do have this very strong shadow, okay, as a part of the front. Now the shadows, in terms of color theory and light, I want the shadows to be cool, okay? So cool shadow, warm light, that's going to create a nice balanced composition and presentation for us. So for the trunk of the tree, for example, let's start with actually, I'm just going to pick this color as a reference, and then we'll just desaturate and darken it up a little bit. You know, it's important as well, I think, when you're being creative and you're painting something to not just go, oh, tree brown. You have to think, tree, what color is that exactly? And you might find yourself looking at something more like a gray, a French gray, a mauve, something like that, okay? So in case of the trunk here, again, I have a low mix selected because I want there to be some nice bold color here. All right, we've got a nice split in our tree. And yes, this is the right layer. Okay, I was just making sure. So just kind of painting in some branches as well. Maybe having some poke through. Okay. We'll clean up as we need. All right, and trees will be thicker toward the bottom and thinner toward the top. All right, so I've got my nice tree in the foreground. Just as a reminder, compositionally speaking, we're kind of using the rule of thirds, at least perceptually, to kind of frame and map this out so we can work quickly, okay? So you can see the shadow even. Let's actually go ahead and start painting that in. So I'm going to pick this mauve. Now I'm going to just start blocking this shadow in. So a little bit bigger on the brush. And maybe I want to up my paint mix. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to up my paint mix because I want this to feel like it's mixing with the ground. All right, just using a short stroke here, letting some of the yellows peek out, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. But I want this shadow, right, to kind of terminate at that third. Okay, so it's kind of why I'm doing that right there, compositionally. So now we can come back to the tree, and I think at this point we can start to hide the sketch. Fresco is screaming at me a little bit because I was trying to paint on an invisible layer, which it's an illegal move. Can't do that. All right, so now the sketch is off. We have to rely a bit more on our contrast, light, and shadow. Okay, but we do have this mostly blocked out. Now we did do things like reflect the, what do you call it? The mountains here. You can play with blending modes. Oops. Let me go back to normal. Just make sure this is in the right spot. Okay, so that's above the water, yeah. So we can play with blending modes, for example. Oh, wrong layer. That was the not reflection. There we go. We can play with the blending modes on these layers if you want. Okay, to figure out what do you want that reflection to look like. Do you want it to be more contrast? Do you want it to be less? Do you want to just leave it as is? Entirely up to you. I'm going to go with multiply, right? And desaturate this a little bit. And we'll also tweak the water as we go. All right. So let's go ahead now and start to use some small brush strokes, for example, on our midground here. I'm going to turn the mix down, up my flow, okay, and start to add some texture to the midground. And you can kind of see there now, right, how this is starting to feel, at least hopefully, it's starting to feel more like, okay, maybe there's some grass, some hits of light here and there, right? Much like the cube we did yesterday, light's not going to hit those surfaces perfectly evenly, so you're going to want some nice bright spots if you want to crank the saturation and brightness up, for example. Just get a few nice bright spots here. Right, maybe it's the edge of this ridge as well. That's catching some light. With all that detail work, that texture is going to help us with our illustration. Same thing here in the foreground. Now I can jump to the foreground layer. I can start to play with this a little bit. All right. Okay. We also had this bluff. I just realized I missed that spot, that bluff. So I'm going to just take the same color that I had for the fence line here and use that to just kind of paint in some of this exposed earth. We can use that for our shoreline as well. Okay, something like that. And as I said before, block in your colors, all right? Do your highs and lows. So now, instead of picking a different color for the shadow, I'm going to pick the same color here and use that with a higher mix, all right? Like so. Oops, is that the right layer? That is not the right layer. Okay. Just got to make sure you are on the right layer and keep track of what you're doing. Don't be like me. Do as I say, not as I do. I think that's how the saying goes, right? So now away from the light. Okay. We're just going to get some shadows, and then I'll show you how to import some brushes to further add some texture to your scene. Okay. So contrast is our friend. All right. Want there to be some nice contrast here and there, highs and lows. Zoom out if you need to. Kind of check things. I guess that's one of the nice things about working digitally as well, is you can just zoom out and take a look at stuff as you go. All right. So I like that red house in the distance. It's a nice color pop. Kind of makes the scene interesting. We have that bigger house up front as well. Again, leveraging the power of perspective, if you will. All right, so the tree kind of flat, and frankly, I'm just going to jump all over here. But in this phase, it's really just about high highs and low lows, I guess, in terms of contrast and definition. Okay, so just on the edge of the tree here. You know, if we want to catch some rim light, since the light's coming from essentially the opposite side of the tree. Someone says, shadows are a mystery to me. Shadows are the absence of light. You can think of it that way. And I'm not an expert on color theory, I would say, but what I will say is you can learn a lot by just opening your eyes and paying attention to the world around you. Draw from observation so you can draw from imagination. All of this we're doing today is from imagination, okay? So the more you practice keeping your eyes open and seeing things, the easier this stuff will get. All right, a bit of pressure sensitivity as well goes a long way with being able to blend your colors on the canvas. Remember, the direction you paint is going to affect how the colors blend. All right, zoom out if you need to. Make some broad strokes in terms of blending. Zoom back in. Now I'm going to pick this nice bright color we had again. All right, I want to make sure we get some nice bright spots happening. All right, just like that. So it does take some time, but it is supremely, I think, relaxing to do this. So it is absolutely, and by it I mean painting this way in Fresco is one of my favorite things to do. It's just so satisfying. All right. Looks like I missed a bit of ground there, so let's cover that ground, pun intended. Tim will appreciate that. So my son has started, he's 10, almost. He started experimenting with his sense of humor. And so he's been just coming up with jokes on his own. So I'll tell you one of his jokes that absolutely slayed me. And he was like, yeah, I came up with it on my own. It's really cool. All right. What is a cannibal's favorite food? Does anyone know? Tim's like, oh no, Spencer, please don't. What is a cannibal's favorite food? All right, the answer is the answer is ramen. So he told me that joke the other day. I was dying for like 30 minutes straight. It was so funny. Or maybe I just love dad jokes. There's also that. All right. Oops. Okay. So I'm trying to see if I can... Why is this not working? Okay. I'm trying to see if I can blend in here. So I'm going to lower the flow. All right. And I want to just soften this shadow a bit. Yes, ramen. Exactly. So that was his joke. He came up with it, and I was like, dude, it was actually pretty good. Not bad. Good times. Ah, kids. Absolutely creative. Puns are wonderful, indeed. All right, I'll tell you one more that he came up with. It's actually a good one. What did the flame say to his partner on their anniversary? or their partner, I guess. Welcome to Adobe Open Mic. All right, so I'm just trying to fade the, if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm just trying to reduce this shadow a little bit, kind of fade it. All right, so just in case you're sitting here wondering, what is he doing? All right, I'm just trying to fade this out a bit. I think it's time we rekindle our love. Samuel says, as you add the shadows, I notice it gives the object shape, almost three-dimensional. It's intentional. It's absolutely intentional. And it's one of those things that, let's see, I need to merge this down. It's one of those things that you just kind of realize and learn over time. So I mentioned this yesterday, but contrast is super important when it comes to showing things in 3D. Okay, so if you can understand that, then it makes it really easy, I think, to add life and depth to your drawing. So that's a good observation there, man. Really good observation. So I'm playing with paint mix and flow as I'm trying to get some nice highlight spots. So I'm going to up the flow and lower my mix, reduce my brush size right through here. And I want there to be some nice bright pops of color, okay, in the foreground. And as always, I don't think I'm going to finish this one today, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of a start at least as to seeing what you can do with something like Adobe Fresco, all right? And then we'll play with some brushes to see if we can get some nice effects going as well. So on the far side here, I'm going to experiment a little bit actually. So I want there to be a little bit of shadow on the opposite side right next to the light. So I'm going to up my paint mix and I'm going to lower the flow a little bit, up the brush size. And now right in here, just introduce a bit of the same color, right, that is on the fence. All right, so that juxtaposition of light and dark is what's going to give you the appearance of contrast that you're after. Okay, so just remember that. I think it's time we rekindle our love. Anyhow, he's gotten really creative with his jokes, so thank you for humoring me, everyone. All right. So if you want to make subtle adjustments, again, you can use the HSB sliders. I find that particularly useful. If you're just trying to incrementally, darken something like right here, as we have this hill in the foreground and hill just behind it, but I want to create some separation. I can even pick up perhaps a little bit of this yellow just to visually separate the two here. So yeah, good call on the observation of contrast. Totally makes a difference if you are painting. All right, can almost make things look 3D. It's pretty cool. That's one of the fun things about being creative, experimenting, is you're almost like a magician, right? You can transport people to new worlds. You can encapsulate a moment if that's what you're after. I just enjoy landscape painting. It's so relaxing. Happy little valley. All right, so you can kind of see here too, just these little darker purples that I'm introducing. Maybe have some of this yellow poking through as well. All right, we don't want a solid shadow, which is what I've been trying to kind of reduce here as we go. Tap on the canvas if you want to find that color that's right there in front of you. If you want to blend something, for example. Really, really helpful. All right. Okay. So this obviously needs tons of work, but I do want to show you a couple quick things before we unfortunately have to wrap. So sad. But I had fun, and I hope you guys did too. All right, so I'm using the sky tone here actually now to add some highlights to the fence. Okay, so once you have the colors in your scene, you can use those. I'm just going to put a couple spots down and then come back in with high mix and low flow, right? And this will essentially just help me blend these colors. Okay, you can kind of think of it that way. So high mix, low flow, that's blend. High flow, low mix, that's you putting down those colors on the canvas itself, okay? Which is not to say that everything has to be smooth. We can have, you know, texture in our scene if we want, but if you're just looking to blend or even find the resultant mix in color, it's a great way to go about it. All right. So the water here, let's do a little bit of touch-up treatment. I'm going to take this green, actually. I like that green. And I'm going to lower my flow, up the brush size a little bit. All right, and then we'll just do some blending. Nice big brush. And really get that low now. I want to get some of the red in the water, perhaps. And the house itself, the hillside, also needs to be in there. This is all stuff we'd continue to work on. Okay, so texture in general. Okay, texture in general. If I want to add some texture to this and help flush it out a bit, what I can do is actually, and this is a part of Adobe Creative Cloud, is you can jump into something like Photoshop, and I have Photoshop pulled up here. Again, hopefully this doesn't blow up my machine. But in Photoshop, I'm just using this on my Mac now. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, it's not showing me the windows, unfortunately, but let's see. Yeah, it's not showing me the windows at all. Weird. Okay, I will just say I'm gonna drag a brush over from Photoshop because this actually didn't work out the way I wanted it to, but I'm going to drag these into my libraries. Okay, I'm going to drag some brushes over. Let's see. Some Kyle Webster brushes. I've got some different impressionistic brushes here that I can drag over. Let's see. There's and Kyle Webster, if you don't know who that is, creates many brushes and resources that you guys can play with and use for free in Adobe Photoshop and Fresco. So pretty awesome. Okay, I've got a foliage brush here I'm going to pull in, and then I'm going to take some of these rake brushes and I'll just drag some random ones over just to show you how this works. Okay, so bear with me here. All right. So I've dragged those brushes over, which unfortunately you can't see, but we'll switch back to the iPad. All right. And what'll happen now is when I go to my pixel brushes, okay, if I tap on pixel brushes and I go to all and scroll down, so I have this library here called Adobe Live. This is where I've been dragging these brushes. So if I tap here, there we go. We've got foliage mix, Cezanne, Syrah, Signac, Van Gogh, Blocky. All right, so let's play with, for example, this foliage brush and see what we can do. So maybe we've blocked in some color for our tree, but we want to move a little quicker. Okay, so I can make this brush a little bit bigger. Let's take some of this green that we have. All right, I'm gonna have to make this brush really big. All right, got some of that green. So if I want to add a bit of texture to this, I can do that. Okay, this is just something you can play with and experiment with. Okay, so I'm just picking those color blocks that we had. All right, and now, and you can also play with the things like spacing on the brush. So if you want more of a scattered stroke, okay, you can do that as well. And then when you zoom out, there's a bit more texture here. Okay, so just a quick way for you to kind of work and get your foliage in. And kind of like I talked about, you know, part of this is thinking about how to layer the foliage on your tree. I think I would have to go back in and modify a few things here, but there's things like pressure and how that affects the size of the brush under shape dynamics. It will jitter the size. So the harder I press, the bigger, for example, will make that. You can play with transfer, right? Control that with your pen pressure. Anyhow, color mixing, if you want to play with that, all right? You can always mess with stuff just to create that variability you want. So if that's something you're interested in and you just want to work a little quicker, all right, let's take some of the light now and mix some of the light into the dark. Go back and forth. And I'm going to go a little bit darker here and almost take some of this purple. All right, again, because I want this to, at least color-wise, feel somewhat related in terms of the shadows. So play with it a little bit. Let me see if I can get one. Feels okay. That's not dark enough. So I'll make this darker and maybe do something like this. So I'll have some dark spots in here we can play with on the inside, for example. Anyhow, all things you can do. If you want to turn that to multiply, you can do that as well. I'm going to reduce the size now, a little bit darker. All right, so even though you're working with those oil brushes, for example, okay, you can do something like that. Now, if you want this to feel perhaps more, I'm trying to think of the right word here. If you want this to feel more like it was done with an oil paintbrush, you can always take the smudge tool and something like dry media. Let's see. I want to pick something with texture. How about this soft chalk? So I can come in now and maybe smudge these leaves a little bit. All right, so they don't feel as precise, but something you can play with. And then maybe come back on top of that to get your texture. So get creative, play around. It's pretty amazing what you can do all with Fresco, okay? Now, the other thing you can do, like I said, I imported these rake brushes. So now on top of the oils, okay, let's keep building our texture here. So jump back into brushes. Okay, they're still loading up here. I've got this rake brush, which I've actually been wanting to try out. And again, wasn't really sure necessarily how this would all look, but fortune favors the bold, right? Something like that. Okay, so this brush feels like it needs a lot of texture. But let's say, you know, I was trying to create some texture here in the foreground. All right, what if I kind of rake here? This kind of becomes a bit of my grassy texture. Okay, and for these little highlights, maybe I can get some of that in certain parts of the drawing. Okay, cool thing with digital again is you can always erase stuff, so if you want to lighten this up, we can lighten this up as well. Boom, 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 just like that. On the tree, if we want to get some texture on the tree, where we have those light spots, right, you can play with that. Get creative, all right. On the house, it's kind of cool. It's almost like a roofing material, but from a distance, it should feel, you know, somewhat consistent in here. And all this is free, guys. All this is free, so definitely get playing. All right, I'd love to see what you come up with in your experiments. All right, so you can play with that. Let's try another brush here. Maybe it's a Syrah brush. Let's see. Yeah, this would actually be pretty great for clouds. So if we had some clouds in the sky that we wanted to get in, okay, or some sort of texture here, kind of paint that in. All right, it's going to show up a little bit better on this side where we have some deeper values, but pretty cool. We can do all of this in Fresco. All right, let's see if I can get a little bit more done here before we wrap. All right. How about the difference between drop shadow and its own shadow of the tree? They can't be the same tone. One of them must be darker, otherwise there's no contrast. That's true. I like to take some liberties when it comes to the shadows and keep them somewhat the same tone, but that's just me. So whatever works for your illustration. I think the important part is to come up with a color theme and kind of stick to that. All right, so I'm gonna jump back to, oh, my live brushes. That's what I wanted. Let's get back to this oil brush. And then we'll give you a little bit of what's ahead today on Adobe Live. Thanks so much for hanging out. It's been a pleasure, as always. Love, love, love creating and experimenting with all of you. And I hope you go out and start experimenting as well. All right, just mixing some colors here for the, is this even the right layer? Yeah, it is. Just mixing some colors here for the hillside. All right. Maybe something like that. Now, the reflection on the water, if you wanted to, one of the things you could do is take like the smudge brush. I forgot what layer that is now. Let's see. Is that correct? Nope. See, I've got to play that layer roulette game a little bit, but actually I think it's, yeah, it's that one. So you could take the smudge brush, make it really small, for example, and then start smudging this a little bit. All right, just to soften that out. So here, for example, on this bluff, we also have a situation where a little bit of contrast can go a long way. And then I can kind of blend that with a little bit of a stroke there. And now we have some separation between the two. All right. It's a good answer, Sam. Thank you. Sam recommends looking up a concept called halfway to black when it comes to shadows. Yeah, I mean, I come from a product design background, but a lot of these principles certainly do apply. Okay, so that's how you can import brushes, block things in, think about your composition, build your own painting, and have a pretty awesome, relaxing time in Adobe Fresco. Pretty awesome. And I didn't finish my painting yesterday, but I think I will spend some time on this one because this has been supremely fun hanging out with you guys and talking as well. So thank you so much. Wrong scene there. So this was getting started with me, Spencer Nugent. Up next, we have the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge with Paul. At 9:30 a.m., we have the character design session with Jonah. 11:30 a.m., Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Julia Masalska. At 12 p.m. Pacific, you will be transported into video editing with Olivia and Zach Fields. At 2 p.m., the XD Creative Challenge with Howard Pinsky will be taking place. And to wrap things up for the day, we've got Doodle Therapy with Alice Lee and Sid Weiler. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Hopefully you pick something up. If not, I want you to remember passion is the process. Let's get creative. Let's get messy. Don't be afraid to try something new and experiment with these amazing tools. Adobe Fresco is pretty awesome. Okay, it is free. There are tons of brushes, resources, you name it for this experience. So if you missed a session yesterday, definitely check it out. There's also an Adobe Max session where I go over the basics of Adobe Fresco, including this ginormous workbook. So it's a good place to start. I hope you get creating and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Take care. It's been a pleasure.